In this episode of Trekking Through Compliance, we take up patterns of force.
Compliance, the final frontier. Tom Fox is the voyager of Trekking Through Compliance. His mission? To explore the original series and seek out and share what it can teach you about compliance. Here's your host, Tom Fox.
Episode 50, Patterns of Force. In this episode of Trekking Through Compliance, we consider the episode Patterns of Force, which aired on February 16th, 1968, and occurred on Stardate 2534.0. Story synopsis. When the Enterprise approaches the inner planet Ekos to investigate the cessation of communication with researcher John Gill, it is attacked by a rocket carrying a nuclear weapon. This is puzzling as well as dangerous, since neither the outer planet Zeon nor the inner planet Ekos is technologically advanced enough to possess weapons or nuclear warheads. The Enterprise retreats to maximum orbital distance, and Kirk and Spock beam down after having positioning broadcasting transponders surgically implanted in case of a mishap. Kirk and Spock discover that a Nazi movement has swept the planet, complete with the genocide of the Zion pigs residing on Ekos. They view a public newscast in which the Iron Cross Second Class is presented to Darus, hero of the fatherland. Kirk and Spock are shocked to learn that John Gill appears to be the leader of the planet's Nazi movement. When they are approached and questioned by a Nazi lieutenant, they overpower him and Spock steals his uniform. Spock then pretends Kirk is a Zion he has captured and nerve pinches a Gestapo commander who wishes to take charge of Kirk. That provides Kirk's uniform, and Spock compliments Kirk by telling him, "You should make a very convincing Nazi." As Kirk and Spock make their way to see the Führer, they are confronted by a Nazi SS major after Spock neglects to salute him. The major becomes suspicious, and Spock is exposed when he is forced to remove his helmet. Spock and Kirk are then whipped in the process of being interrogated. Nazi Party Chairman Enig interrupts the questioning and tells the Nazis to lock up Kirk and Spock for an hour, in contradiction to the standing orders to execute prisoners after their interrogation. In prison, Kirk and Spock speak to an imprisoned Zion whom they previously encountered being beaten on the streets by the Nazis. They find the Nazi movement began several years ago, correspondingly with the arrival of John Gill. They escaped from prison by making a primitive laser from the rubidium crystals in their transponders, using the cell's incandescent light bulb as the excitation source. Not quite a flash arc in ruby crystal, but close enough in a pinch. Spock hides outside the cell and then nerve pinches the guard when Kirk summons him under the pretext of wanting to talk. Kirk and Spock allow the Zeon prisoner to tag along. Kirk and Spock penetrate the Nazi headquarters with the help of Secretary Darus and Chairman Enig. They discover Gill is only the drugged puppet of Deputy Führer Melakon after he gives a stilted speech unleashing the final assault on Zeon. McCoy is beamed down and manages to barely overcome the drug. Gill tells him that he started the Nazi movement to unify the planet because it was the most efficient system on Earth he knew. With an extra hypo from Kirk, Gill manages to call back the invasion fleet and denounce Melakon as a traitor. Melakon grabs a machine gun and kills Gill, only to be shot himself. Chairman Enig then takes over and stops the killing, declaring, "It is time to live the way our Führer intended." Kirk and Spock then return to the Enterprise in peace. So, what's the fun fact on this episode? Not that there are many fun facts. Well, John Meredith Lucas wrote this episode out of his fascination with the functioning of totalitarian regimes, especially Nazi Germany, and their ability to stay in power. William Shatner quoted him to Chris Kresge in the Star Trek Memories as saying, "It was fun to write a well-meaning Nazi, a guy who for the right cause completely screwed everything up. You know, we started with the question, how did the Nazis get past the street gangs and take root basically among the decent people? How did sane, reasonable adults buy into this? The answer seemed to be it was because it was efficient and society was beset with all kinds of problems, and it seemed like a feasible necessity. So it becomes feasible and people take that leap." The screenwriter of this episode, John Meredith Lucas, wrote the episode out of his fascination with the functioning of totalitarian regimes, especially Nazi Germany, and their ability to stay in power. Shatner quoted him to Chris Krasicki in Star Trek Memories as saying, quote, "It was fun to write a well-meaning Nazi, a guy who, for the right course, completely fucked everything up. You know, we started with the question, how the hell did Nazism get past the shits and street gangs and take root among basically decent people? How did sane, reasonable adults come to buy into this BS? The answer seemed to be because it was efficient and because in a society beset by all kinds of problems, it may have seemed like a feasible necessity. So it becomes feasible and people take that leap," end quote. An early draft of the episode had the source of the cultural contamination arriving aboard a small ambassador-class vessel called the Magellan. The name was later applied in TNG to the ambassador class of ships in the 24th century. No stardate is logged in this episode. B. Joe Trimble gave it a stardate of 2534 in her Star Trek Concordance, and that's what we use in this episode. So, a troubling episode to watch. In the 60s, I think actually the Nazis were much more seen as a defeated enemy than the evil they were now associated with. So I think it's even more poignant to watch it or rewatch it in 2022 than when it originally came out. For this episode, I wanted to take a look at some of the ethical lessons because that is perhaps the biggest challenge from this episode. And how can these ethical challenges be answered in real-world compliance context? So number one, understand the context. Thoroughly research and analyze the historical, political, and cultural factors that contribute to each ethical challenge within your organization or even the industry. Assess the power dynamics, stakeholder interest, and underlying motivations that shape the compliance landscape. 2, identify unethical practices. Actively monitor for signs of coercion, manipulation, or undue influence within your organization. Obviously, establishing robust whistleblower mechanisms to encourage employees to report suspected unethical practices. Conduct comprehensive audits and investigations to uncover hidden or normalized unethical behavior or even anomalies. 3, recognize the dangers of normalization. Regularly review organizational policies, procedures, and culture to identify areas where ethical practices have become normalized. Implement ongoing training and awareness programs to help employees recognize and challenge the normalization of unethical conduct, and foster a series of ethical decision-making and accountability at all levels of your organization. 4, gather diverse perspectives. Engage with a wide range of stakeholders, including employees, customers, regulators, and industry peers to gain a comprehensive understanding of your compliance challenges. Encourage open dialogue and create safe spaces for individuals to share their experiences and concerns without the fear of retaliation. Collaborate with cross-functional teams and external experts to leverage diverse expertise and insights. 5, avoiding compromising principles. Develop and consistently hold clear, unambiguous code of conducts that sets up the standards for your organization's overall conduct and values. Empower compliance professionals to make principled decisions and resist pressures to compromise your organization's ethical standards. Establish robust governance structures and independent oversight mechanisms to ensure accountability and transparency. 6, empower whistleblowers. Implement robust whistleblower protection policies and procedures to encourage individuals to report suspected wrongdoing. You should provide multiple channels for reporting, including anonymous and confidential options to mitigate the risk of retaliation, but also make sure you have an open door policy and a speak up policy for those who want to reach out directly to their managers or to the compliance function. Ensure that whistleblower reports are thoroughly investigated and that appropriate action is taken to address any issues brought forward. 7. Use appropriate interventions. Tailor your compliance strategies and interventions to the specific challenges faced by your organization or even your industry. Employ a wide range of tools such as policy updates, training programs, disciplinary actions, and collaborative engagements to address ethical breaches. Continuously evaluate the effectiveness of interventions and adapt them as needed to address evolving compliance risks. By applying these lessons from this great episode, Patterns of Force, compliance professionals can navigate the complexities of the real world and promote a culture of integrity and contribute to the creation of a more ethical and sustainable organization. Join us tomorrow where we take up the episode by any other name.
If you enjoyed this episode of Trekking Through Compliance, you can help it grow by sharing it with the biggest Trek fan you know.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.